Alright everyone, the Al Sharpton acolytes have made it clear that when they say defund the police, they don't actually mean abolishing police forces. They just want to take money from them and basically give it to underprivileged people who happen to be non-white. Literally, link in the description, archived of course, to a tweet by one of these leftists. They're making it clear that this is just a shakedown. It's very interesting because the George Floyd reaction, initially, one man gets killed by the cops. One of the cops involved was actually white, by the way, so it's a big racist issue. Everyone goes crazy. They burn hundreds and hundreds of businesses just in Minneapolis, St. Paul, causing untold amounts of damage to life, limb, and property. People are killed. People are assaulted. I'm sure there are all sorts of attendant crimes where the police are distracted, and so you get an extra burglary or two as well. You got spiraling crime and riots and people going crazy. This has accomplished nothing. It will accomplish nothing. These lunatics are still trying to burn things in D.C. and Minneapolis even now, although they have to spar with the National Guard to do it, which makes it a little bit more difficult than when it's some metro police force of idiots like the ones in Seattle that are backing away to let the communists LARP as though they're staging some sort of weird revolution. It'd be interesting if they tried to do that in a city that had a competent police force, and Seattle definitely doesn't. Anyway, they're making it clear that it's just a shakedown. No, it's not a revolution, just give us more money. And of course that money would be allocated on a very racial basis. It would be quite bigoted. One person gets killed by the cops. Everyone loses their minds. How many people over the so far this year have died in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region as the result of drug-related gang violence? I don't know the number, but I guarantee it's more than one. It's probably in the double-digit range somewhere. Where's the outcry about that? If you want to say that a group, in a city or wherever, is underprivileged, look at the situation for what it really is. Why are they underprivileged? Well, there's violence, there's oppression and stuff. Okay, who's more oppressive? Gangs that kill 20, 30 people? Or a few rogue cops that have all been fired and charged, by the way, as well, because, unlike criminal gang members, they can be held accountable, who killed one man. Which one of these things is worse for that neighborhood, for that community, for that city, that metropolitan region? Well, clearly the former, the drugs and cartels, reducing the amount of money that the police have so they have to, cut staff and, sell off some of their police dogs. How the hell is that going to help these inner city communities? The only way in which it would help is if the police come along and tell these inner city communities, hey, arm up and guard your own neighborhoods too. The cops love, by the way, whenever they're polled. And I'm not talking about police commissioners, the people who claim to speak for the police. When you poll beat cops, or certainly U.S. sheriffs, they all support the Second Amendment and say, yeah, it's wonderful because when we show up, the perp's already dead. If these communities were actually going to arm up and go toe-to-toe with the gang members and the cartels instead of sitting there pelting the police with rocks, most of those problems would disappear. There'd also be more social cohesion. No, they should be throwing rocks at the drug dens, but they don't do that because they know that the drug den is filled with weapons and those gang members will fire back because they don't care whether you live or die. That's the real problem. The real problem is the inner city crime rate is too damn high. Now, this never happens in Farmville. This isn't happening in small town America or out in the suburbs. This happens in blighted ghetto regions of the inner city that are understaffed usually by their police anyway. The police go into these neighborhoods, they can't even get cooperation because people are so afraid of them. Meanwhile, these same people will cooperate with a goddamn Crip gang member. It's total lunacy to defund the police. If anything, you would simply want better training and reform of the police. Taking money away from an inner city police force and building, a swimming pool or something, that's not going to help the community. That's just not the way it works. They're like, oh, well, we need more counselors. You can provide more counseling in school. Why aren't you talking about the fact that the federal government fucked the educational system? Why aren't you talking about the fact that these inner city idiots, which are almost entirely leftists, have fucked your educational system? Those schools aren't pissing away their money and malfunctional because of Trump. They're not dysfunctional because of uber scary white Gadsden flag wavers out in the boondocks. That's not what fucked them up. Overt centralization fucked them up. Teachers' unions fucked them up. The lack of counselors is due to the fact that the admins running these schools prefer to sit there and embezzle money and buy another fucking town car than actually do anything. Why don't you kick these people out? Why don't you transfer to a more meritocratic system in your educational institutions? And why don't you try reform the police and then try to educate the community? maybe if the community was willing to give up the names of the gang members and the police could do their job without worrying about somebody literally shooting them in the back, maybe the crime rate would go down. You see, in areas that have armed up, in which there's social cohesion, the crime rate's been dropping for a long time. The holdout locations in the U.S., over the last 20 years, violent crime in the United States has plummeted by enormous proportions. You're safe today as you were in the early 70s. Until the last couple of years, you were as safe as you were in the mid-60s. The crime rate ticked very slightly upwards. I think property crime dropped, though, still. The crime rate right now, across the board, for almost every class of crime, is considerably lower than it was a decade or two ago. The real crime sprees started to end at the end of the 90s, early 2000s. Part of that's, by the way, the result of less gun control. Less gun control, the internet spreading around, catharsis, certainly, better policing efforts in some areas, and you know, other factors, less social alienation, fall of the USSR, and so forth, certainly helped in a behavioral sense. The only places that haven't seen a reduction are blighted locations invariably run by the far left. They're the only ones. A handful of inner city areas, usually not even the entire city. And that's really the long and short of it. And these cities typically have more gun control too. It makes it harder. There are places in the United States, and this is like a foreign concept, because I'm a Vermonter. I'm from a constitutional carry state with very limited amounts of gun control. What little is there, it technically violates our state constitution already. I'm not sure why there aren't more active lawsuits going on against Phil Scott's fucking sellout cuckoldry. Anyway, I can walk into a gun store in the state of Vermont, and after a brief, rudimentary check, walk out with a gun 15 minutes later, which is how it should be to exercise your constitutional rights. Apparently, Tim Pool was talking about this, because I guess Crowder's people are sending him a gun of some sort or something like that. He's talking about how he could, he's trying to go through the firearm process, and like hours later, he got nowhere. It's astonishing to me. And these places almost invariably, again, overlap with the most crime, including gun crime. Because if you're part of a gang, you're getting your gun illegally anyway. You're not going through a background check. Arm the citizenry, reform the police, but the shaking people down and saying, well, we want to drain money from the cops and give it to the poor or something, that's not going to help. We've been trying this since the war on poverty began. It has uplifted nobody. The only things that have reduced crime are tangential and have nothing to do with left-wing proposals. If anything, they're more far-right, scary, like reduction in gun control that allows people to defend themselves, at least in civilized parts of the United States run by governments that are legitimate, as opposed to idiots like Whitmer, idiots like Ralph Northam, idiots like the Minneapolis City Council. These people are idiots. And the proof is in the pudding. These places are dysfunctional. Minneapolis is still on fire at the moment. It's been days and days. You've had plenty of time to crack down and restore order and address the problem in a reasonable, feasible way. Police brutality is an issue, but you've got so many other issues that are actually much more prevalent, and they get goddamn fucking ignored. And you know why? Because it's not politically correct to talk about them. It's not politically correct to say that the inner city has more problems with often black-on-black gang violence than it does with the average rogue cop. It's just a statistical reality. You have idiot cops like the dude who killed George Floyd, and then people burn the neighborhood down, and this fucks everybody over. And through all of the smoke billowing and people getting rocks pelted at them and all of the racial animus and other bullshit, the order begins to break down, and then the left comes in and sells people a pig in a poke, sort of snake oil cure, saying, oh, well, if we just do more of what we've been doing for the last 30, 40 years, things will get better this time. DC loves to do this. Oh, the government's got problems? Make the government bigger. Those problems will go away. Oh, there's poor people? Let's put more money into programs that for 20, 30 years have failed to uplift them. Let's bitch about the cops killing one man and ignore dozens of other people killed by people within that community who were too busy dealing drugs to give a goddamn about their next door neighbor. It's politically inconvenient to point out that reality. Now, who fucking gives a shit? That's about all. Peace out.